Afternoon, everybody. I'm excited today because we have a new face here, but is not certainly not new to Call to Peace. If you've been to a retreat, and so I'll get to introduce her to you today. And we have Dr. Deborah Wingfield with us. It would not be Domestic Violence Awareness Month if we had not interviewed Dr. Deborah. So I am so excited to be having this interview. And for those who are joining in, yes, we're in the middle of well, not in the middle. We're in the beginning of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and that is our month to collectively join together to shine a light on domestic abuse, and we invite you to be part of that. This month, we are trying to raise $175,000 to continue to serve the 1 in 3 women that are impacted by abuse. But we'll talk more about that later. Let's go ahead and introduce everybody. I know people are familiar with Dr. Deborah, so let's introduce the person over here, Camilla. She is certainly not new to Call to Peace. Camilla, can you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and how you're connected to Call to Peace? Oh, Camilla, can you introduce yourself? Or can you hear me? I don't think you're muted. Oh, I'm going to go ahead, Dr. Deborah. I'll have you introduce yourself.
Okay.
Camilla.
All right. So I'm Dr. Deborah Wingfield. I am the trainer for Call to Peace for the Advocacy training program. I do that through my own business, House of Peace Publications. And I have been involved with domestic abuse and coercive control for over 50 years now. I have been working with survivors. I've worked with offenders through a court-ordered program, and I've worked many, many years with children who have been impacted by abuse, either by their parents or through domestic abuse and coercive control.
Awesome. Well, we are so glad to have you here. We're having a little technical difficulty with Camilla in getting her connected. She is actually our board of directors for Call to Peace Ministries, but I'll have her introduce herself in a few minutes. And so she is checking some settings, and then she'll be back in here. But today we're going to be talking about advocacy. And how that is driving change in our societies. And by society, I mean our churches, our communities, our families. It is making such a difference. And so I'm excited to have this conversation because this is really, really important. Because as Dr. Deborah knows and Camilla knows, and we know at Call to Peace, without good education and training in domestic violence, so many people can do a lot more damage than good. And so we're excited to talk about how this training that Dr. Deborah has created and we partner with along Call to Peace Ministries is driving incredible change in what is happening. And we're going to be sharing some research-based things as well to show you how it's driving change. And we're excited. So let's get started with our conversation. And Dr. Deborah, I'd like to ask you, how is the knowledge? Well, let's start from the very beginning. I was thinking about there's a lot of people coming in. And since we're still at the beginning of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, let's start with what is domestic violence. Can you give us a definition of that, Dr. Deborah?
Okay. So, Lauren, domestic abuse, or my preferred definition, my preferred term is coercive control, is a pattern of behaviors. That's 2 or more times that a behavior occurs where one partner uses power and control over another partner in their relationship to control that person.
Oh, great. So Camilla can hear us. Sorry, I'm excited too at the same time. That was an excellent definition, Dr. Deborah. I appreciate that. And Camilla, you can hear us?
I sure can.
Yay! I'm so happy. Yay! I was like praying, and so I'm so glad you're here. And so Dr. Deborah just gave us a wonderful definition of what domestic violence is. And let's take a brief moment, and I want you to introduce yourself. I told everybody briefly who you are, but I would like for you to go ahead and tell everybody who you are and how you're connected to Call to Peace.
All right. Yes, I'm Camilla Borama, and I am the chair of the board of Call to Peace Ministries, and what a privilege it is to serve in that way for this just awesome, wonderful ministry that God is using in so many ways.
Yes, and we are so grateful for you and all that you're doing, y'all. She is amazing and has done so much to bless and serve us as a staff as well. So we are grateful that you're here today. And so, as Dr. Deborah just gave a definition of domestic violence, I would like to kind of go into a brief overview, Dr. Deborah, of how right training is helping victims of domestic violence, but also can we start with how, if somebody is uninformed, how can that cause damage? So I kind of want to lay the foundation for this conversation for those who are new to be able to understand, why is this important? Why is it important to be trained when it comes to understanding coercive control as you just defined?
Okay, so I I had a couple more comments on my definition.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay, because we're all excited that Camilla can now speak with us. So, one thing that many victims and survivors of domestic abuse don't understand is that abusers use many, many tactics that are non physical. And I emphasize that because the non physical tactics tend to lead to a person saying, well, I wasn't hit. So how was I abused? And we know that those tactics of exerting power and control include intimidations, threats, emotional abuse, financial abuse, use of the children to manipulate and control their partner, using male privilege, using isolation, using minimizing, denying, and blaming, sexual coercion, and physical violence. So, why did I list all of those out? Those come from the power and control wheel that was identified by the Duluth Project in Minnesota. And since then, we have actually identified other ways that abusers use coercive control to manipulate and keep their victims under their control. So coercive control is more about mental captivity or entrapment. And entrapment is where the controller, wears you down mentally, takes control of your life through entrapment, humiliation, degradation, and discounting your personhood. So I'd like our listeners to think about that. If you're in a relationship where you don't feel like you have a voice, where you don't feel like you're recognized as a separate human being with your own thoughts, your own choices, then you are probably in a coercive control relationship. And one of the things that we do with our advocates is we train our advocates in depth on coercive control. And they are able to help someone actually identify how they are being controlled and by what means. And not all coercive controllers use all the same tactics, and they use them at different levels. The whole idea is they are looking at a way to entrap you so that you are unable to even think for yourself because you're in constant chaos. You're walking on eggshells. And when you're walking on eggshells, you're constantly second guessing yourself. So we really want individuals who may be listening, if you resonate with any of those pieces of that definition, you have an opportunity not only to help yourself, but to actually make a difference in your life by working with an advocate. And our advocates are trained to help walk alongside you and figure those things out.
That was a really good definition. I will be honest, I think that is the best definition of domestic abuse, so thoroughly explained, I have ever heard. That was amazing. Thank you. And it leads you to the question, and it's kind of a loaded question, and I don't know if you can answer it quickly or
Mhm.
not, but why? Why does he do this? Like, why does he want control over her?
Okay, that's a great question. And why he wants control over her is answered in our courses. So I'm going to let that hang out there a little bit
I like
because because we have courses that help her understand how she got entrapped and how he uses that because of his own issues. And I like to reference a book by another colleague of mine, Lundy Bancroft. Why does he do that? That's a great book to read to understand what is going on in his head and to move forward. And we do discuss all of those things in the advocacy training program.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And so many women, including myself and many people I know go through this course, find a lot of healing themselves. Things begin to make sense for the first time that they didn't understand before. And it's like they start seeing abuse in a new way. Like, I didn't even realize this aspect was abusive or this was abusive. And it helps you heal like completely and understand it. So, why is this really important to understand when you're helping women as well?
It's extremely important to understand because she's in there trying to get out of the fog that she's been in. And that fog really feels like I don't know what to think because he has basically taken over her reality. And what we want to do is we want to help her get back in touch with her reality. And I know that from the research. I also know that from my own personal experience that when I was coming out of this, it was very difficult for me to figure out what was real for me and what was that voice in my head still telling me what to do.
Yes. And Camilla, you've been through the advocacy course now a couple times too. Is there any thoughts that you would like to add about the advocacy course as well?
Yes, it's interesting. We're here today at the CCEF conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and meeting with ladies that have been through the advocacy course, not only to help others, but as they were going through the course, they discovered that it also helped them in their healing journey. And so that's very exciting, as Dr. Deborah mentioned. But for us to have the education to know first steps when someone approaches you, what is the first steps that you need to engage in with that person that's hurting so strongly, and then how to continue to walk alongside them. It's an invaluable training, and I'm so thankful for myself personally that I've been able to go through the training.
Yes, me too. I am so grateful for it. And so that kind of leads me again to our next question is how is knowledge of course control that you just spoke about so eloquently, Dr. Deborah, how is that people who are getting that as people helpers, how is that driving change in our society? Because it's making a difference in our churches, in our communities, and in our families and just our culture and difference. So I want to hear from Dr. Deborah, maybe a research side of things, and I'm going to let Camilla speak into the churches. She's involved with her church and that, and be able to talk into things she's seeing change and how that impact is being driven there. So we'll start with Dr. Deborah, and then we'll lead into Camilla here.
Okay, so first of all, with families, even if there is a divorce and there's shared parenting, advocates are able to help the safe parent actually help their children recover from the experience of coercive control. And Emma Katz, in her book Children, oh, wait a minute, someone needs to grab that name because there's so much out there. But Emma Katz has done deep research on the impacts of coercive control on children and how they experience it, even if it's not directed at them. If it's directed at the safe parent, if it's directed in the household, even though children may be in another room, it's one of those things that children do experience that. And if we can help mothers specifically, because we work only with women, understand how to build resilience in their children so their children can recover from that and they can go on to live less traumatized lives. And we work with mental health professionals, we work with attorneys, we help educate anyone in our communities that want to learn more about how to help someone come out of this deep fog that the coercive controller has created.
Yes, as I'm the director of women's ministries at our church here, at our local church here in Chattanooga, and we have discovered that when women begin to understand or begin to realize that what is going on in their homes behind closed doors is not normal, And when they began to come out of that fog, as Dr. Deborah has referenced, many times, in fact, most of the time, the first person that they go to is a church leader. And so it is very, very important as church leaders that we know how to recognize the red flags. We must know how to walk alongside these victims and these hurting women that do walk into our churches, that are a part of our churches. We must be able to know how to help them in a healthy and a helpful way. And those churches that are able to come alongside, those churches that know how to respond faithfully, they can be the hands and the feet of Jesus, both to the survivor and to the perpetrator. It's so important that we know and we are educated and we can help in a faithful way.
So, Lauren, you asked about the other side. What is the harm of not knowing? And we have seen how women will go, they go to the family court system thinking the family court system is going to take care of it, that they're going to be able to talk to the judge and explain to the judge what has happened. And we know that judges are very uninformed about coercive control, that attorneys that work in the courts are primarily uninformed. We do have some informed attorneys. They're few and far between and very hard to find. We have court personnel that are assigned in custody cases or parenting time cases that are uninformed about coercive control. And what this does is it leads to harm for children. If you look at Saunders' research, if you look at Joan Meyer's research, though that body of research is very connected with how children are harmed. And what we see happen is, even though we have 58,000 children a year, and that's an approximation because we don't know for sure, but 58,000 children a year are sent to live with their abuser. They're sent to live with that coercive controller. And sometimes without an advocate, what we'll see is that safe parent will lose parenting time or become invisible in their children's lives, so that the coercive controller takes over and has sole parenting time with the children. And that's extremely harmful to children. And we know from the ACE study that children who are impacted by abuse, impacted by domestic violence, impacted by substance abuse, those children grow up and have more early onset chronic illnesses. We lose them in the employment sector because they can't maintain employment. We lose them in our communities because they become disabled and have to depend on the community to support them. And I was pulling, because you asked for statistics, Lauren, so I was pulling some of that information about the costs. And so let me get down to the economic costs. So although it's difficult to quantify, the CDC in 2003 found that direct healthcare costs of domestic violence totaled approximately $4.1 billion a year. And an additional 1.8 billion was lost in productivity due to injuries and premature death. So we are talking about horrendous problems on the back end. And I know from one of the earliest trainings that I went to that the ERs find women coming into the ER between the ages of 18 and 40 more prominently have issues connected with domestic abuse or coercive control. So healthcare systems, schools, kids don't do well in school if they're living with an abuser who is either a tyrant Or we find, oh, I got custody of the children, but I don't really want them. So I'll just let them do whatever they want, and they can be on their screens for 24 hours a day. So we have all kinds of harm that as advocates, we can help that safe parent at least balance that out. And we know our court system is so broken. And one of the things that we have found is the earlier we get involved in a court case, the more positive the outcome is for the safe parent and the children.
Thank you, Dr. Deborah. And I can say too, working with Call to Peace, so many of the women that we have worked with when I'm writing stories or hearing stories are able to say, you know what, I would not have been able to maintain custody of my kids had it not been for the advocacy course, or it hadn't been for an advocate that walked alongside me. One thing we do know is, I was reading statistics recently, is that 92% of fathers, well, that fight for custody more likely will get more than partial cut, more than 50-50, will more likely get a larger percentage of custody. And we know that abusive fathers are more likely to fight for full custody than not. That is the normal. And these women are heartbroken and show up in court and don't present well, because they feel crazy, they're losing control. And so we help them as advocates to be able to know how to present themselves in court and be able to work through that process and be able to advocate for themselves. And a lot of women have been able to share that they're able to regulate themselves and all types of stuff. So we have helped so many women be able to maintain and build relationships with their kids. And this stops the generational cycle of abuse. So when you are supporting Call to Peace Ministries, you are stopping the cycle of generational abuse, because it continues. Children who grow up in it are more likely to marry abuser or become abusers themselves. And so as we teach parents and moms, well, parents, moms are parents, but teach them how to understand their children and the impacts of it, we're helping break that cycle. And so that way it's not repeated with the next generation. So thank you. Is there anything else y'all, either one of you, want to add to that? All
No.
right.
I know you have other questions for us. So.
Yes. So how is advocacy driving a change? We just talked about that one, but we're kind of going more into families and communities. And that's where you did, well, we actually just answered that question. So we're going to skip that one unless you had more information you wanted to share about that one.
Well, one of the things that we do know is our advocates go out into their communities. They make connections with local resources. They make connections, as Camilla will talk about, with their churches. They make connections with mental health professionals. And the more people who are educated about the dynamics of coercive control, the more we are shifting the narrative that's going on in our communities. And it's very, very important that we continue to provide this education. So one of the things I wanted to say is that our advocates are trained to educate not only survivors, but also within their communities. They're trained to provide empowerment or equipping survivors, as you talked about, Lauren, to be able to handle themselves well in court, and to have someone who can hear them and the emotional pieces that go on that can really harm their case if they take that into court. So what we want to do is we want to give them what goes to the courthouse and what goes into advocacy and how advocates can help. And we train for all that in our advocacy programs.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing all that. And I do have a spin-off kind of question of that. And I want to know, without this help, without understanding coercive control, before you started doing the course and before people were more aware, how was things different? Have we seen any improvement since people are becoming more aware of coercive control? Has there been any outcome changes that we can measure?
Well, I haven't seen outcome specific data. I do know that there are many individuals working in the field, and they have been able, in some cases, to turn cases around. So when the abuser or the coercive controller gains custody of the children, and the survivor ends up being invisible in those children's lives, we have been able to turn some of those cases around. Joan Meyer's research shows what happens if children are identified and helped. So what we want to do is we want to give you a broad education on all the areas of impacts of coercive control. And we do bring in a lot of research. You can see my desk behind me. I mean, that's just a small portion. I have bins around my office full of research articles. And that's my breakfast reading. I know it may sound weird for some people, but I read research while I eat my breakfast because we have so much that we need to do to help people, and we still need to understand what's happening. And I want to make a point about that, Lauren. When I first started in this field, specifically working with domestic abuse and coercive control, there was very little research that was being done. That was back in the early 90s when we first were starting to gain shelters across the country. We were first getting the Violence Against Women Act passed. Since that time, the research has exploded. And I can tell you, I can go on any day of the week to my research databases and pull 5 to 10 articles on a topic. And when I first started doing these trainings, if I could find one piece of research, I was happy. So there are a lot of people out there working on this and working towards change.
Yeah, Lauren, if I could just step in on that also, just practically from a church level, we are also seeing exciting changes. Thankfully, Call to Peace Ministries has had such an impact in that area with their Protect the Flock sessions, their Protect the Flock training that they are having all over the country, really. And if you're interested in a Call to Peace Ministries Protect the Flock training, you can go to our website, and there's information there very clearly on how to reach out to our partnership team. But it is so important for people, for there to be advocates in churches that also know how to walk alongside, that can support the survivor, that know how to handle the first steps and then beyond, can go to court with them, can educate the survivor, can encourage the survivor. So I am also very encouraged, just from a practical standpoint, on how the churches are beginning to respond faithfully. And a lot of that is because of the advocacy training and just being aware of the red flags and having those glasses on that you can see and be aware of what's going on. It's so important in a survivor's healing journey to have an advocate beside them.
Wow, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I love to, you said a lot of things about churches having advocates. I think that's really important. And I want to hone in on that and get your opinion on that. Why should a church have advocates? And I do want to explain that a little bit because I don't want pastors here to be like, wait, you mean I got to have advocates too? Well, we encourage you to host a Protect the Flock training, and we will help you send women in your church through our advocacy training. So we're not putting any more to do on you, but we're just saying, hey, there's one in your church that might feel called to this. Let's send them through. And then in the meantime, we have advocates that will walk alongside you as you're advocating for women. Why is it important for churches to work with advocates affiliated with Call to Peace Ministries? And we're faith-based. I know churches may hear this and be like, whoa, I'm not sure of that. No, we are a faith-based advocacy. So why is this important that they have an advocate alongside them?
Any church that can have an advocate that is especially trained by Call to Peace Ministries, it would be invaluable to them. That advocate can empathize with the survivor. They can educate the survivor. They can encourage the survivor. And a lot of times that advocate is also a woman that can walk alongside another woman. So as a pastoral staff, many times that is an invaluable asset also. I can't say enough about the advocacy's role in helping a survivor in her healing journey, and as she walks that difficult path of getting healing and knowing how to um, navigate with her children and just all the different parts that are so difficult in that walk that she has ahead of her. So advocates are invaluable, and if a church has an advocate, what an honor that is, and what a privilege that is, and how valuable that is to that church.
Mhm. Yes, and women listen to this too. You can become an advocate with Call to Peace Ministries. You go to our website. I've dropped it into the comments while Camilla was sharing, and you can find Become a Faith-Based Advocate. You can go through our course with Dr. Deborah Wingfield, and you can be an advocate in your church and encourage your church to get a Protect the Flock training, and you can get them involved. And it's an amazing thing to see how churches are coming alongside these women to help them walk through domestic abuse, literally being the hands and feet of Jesus for the oppressed and calling the oppressor into repentance. And it's amazing to hear the stories. I think they're some of my favorite of seeing church communities come alongside women and the difference that makes in not only her life, but in her children's lives and their faith. And something I always say often is when a woman is, I'll switch over this block here, sorry, is when a woman walks away from a marriage because of abuse. If her church forsakes her, as Dr. Deborah has said, the impacts of abuse, when the church says, I'm going to turn a blind eye, I'm not going to get involved. Well, he's such a godly man. He was a deacon. I don't believe her. What do you think that says to the children? Because they're impacted by the abuse, whether it's been physical or not, they are impacted and they know the truth. A lot of times they know what's happening behind closed doors. They see their mother being yelled at. They see their mother being threatened. And when the church doesn't stand with her mother, a lot of times those children say, I don't want anything to do with God, because to them, the church is filled with hypocrisy. So when you walk alongside a woman, you are restoring families to Christ. You are helping future generations want to come and know Jesus. I know there's a story we did 2 years ago of a woman whose church helped her. And not only that, the pastor helped this mother. The pastor then led her children to Christ. Her children became Christians because of the impact they saw from their mother being helped. So think of that generation wealth. Now those children are in Christ and are going to continue on in the faith. Like if that church had said no, would that story be different? So this is really important for churches to get right, to save and preserve families, future generations of Christ followers. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Camilla and Dr. Deborah. Both of those things. And I see Laurie giving a shout out for Protect the Flock training. Yes, she's one of our church partnership liaisons. So definitely recommend that as well. And I want to jump back here and to focus into the advocacy course again. And I want to talk about a little bit more about the advocacy course while we're here. I hadn't kind of throwing a little bit of curveball for you. In what ways have you felt that the advocacy course, I would love to hear from you, Camilla, has changed your life? And Dr. Deborah, how has teaching this course and writing it, how have you seen it change your life and the lives of advocates that have been through this? I'll go first.
Did you say me go first?
I'll let y'all pick.
Okay, I'll go first. The advocacy course has absolutely changed my understanding of domestic abuse. It has changed my understanding of how to respond to it. It has helped me to understand exactly what is going on. It's helped me understand that these women are not alone. We're walking alongside them. I wish I had known about this advocacy training years ago. When I went through the first year, I knew in my heart that I was so thankful, but I wish I had done it much earlier. And I'm thankful for the research-based teaching that we receive every week. It is amazing. It has helped me understand so much clearer the entire picture, and I'm very, very appreciative of it.
Thank you. That was so well said. And Dr. Deborah.
Thank you, Camilla. It's helpful to know from my standpoint how that's impacting others, because I'm the person that's doing the teaching and I don't often get feedback. So I want to talk about that. But How it's impacted me is I see so many lives of survivors changed, so many survivors getting on their feet, moving forward, being able to provide a good, solid, stable, nurturing home for their children, and a nurturing home without coercive control happening, without abuse happening, and how those children are learning to be healthy and gaining boundaries, learning how to stand up for themselves instead of losing their voices. And I have seen so many children that, as I've worked with their survivor moms, and they say, but my child can't say anything to their father when they're with him because he will just get angry, he will attack them. And what I see is we're helping those children find their voices and find a way to stand up for themselves. So it really does make a big difference. And they are safer. We're teaching parents how to keep their children safe, how to teach their children to be safe. And you asked about churches and the community, and I wanted to talk about one thing here. The safety risk to communities is very high. And people sometimes say, why are people doing school shootings? Why are people shooting up their churches? And one of the things that we know is when we start delving into the background of that shooter, oftentimes there is domestic abuse or coercive control as part of their history or as part of how they've tried to control someone. So if you hear about churches that are being shot up, the first thing that my mind goes to is, okay, was that person coercively controlling? And now all of a sudden we have a church shooting, and how that's damaging to the community. So we still have to keep educating. We have a broad spectrum of individuals in our society that are having contact with people who are experiencing coercive control and don't see a way out. As advocates, we can help them find that way out. We can help them learn to identify what's going on and how to leave safely. So people say, why doesn't she leave? And I say, you're asking the wrong question. The right question is, why does he feel like he has a right to coercively control her? Why does he feel like he can run her life? And we have to let everyone know in society that healthy relationships come from mutuality and reciprocity. They don't come from one person exerting power and control over the other person. So you'll have to stop me there because I'll go on
Oh,
forever.
I love it. I loved everything you said. That is a wonderful way to close out. And I'm glad that you mentioned that about school shootings and the issues that are happening in our communities. It's a grave, grave cost to our communities to not take domestic violence seriously and advocate for women who are in oppression, and to utilize the advocates that we have, or utilize advocates in that situation. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Just amen. I totally agree. And thank you, Dr. Deborah, for your work in the advocacy training. The research is current. It is always changing, and we're always kept up to speed. And I really appreciate that.
Yes.
So one thing, Lauren, people need to know is we do have scholarships available if you're unable to pay for the advocacy training program, or we do have partial scholarships available as well. Our program goes 12 months. You can enter the program at any time and take the courses either live or by replay. So I know some people say, I can't be there during the day when you teach these courses. We have replays. We set it up that way. So you can take it by replay. And we have a whole system to know that you have done that.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much. And yes, the advocacy course is great. You can go to calltopeace.org. It's in the comments. And from there, you can register to become a faith-based advocate and take the course. I highly recommend it. I have been through it a few times myself, and each time I learned something new it's ever, like she's saying, the research is ever changing. It's phenomenal. It's great. The first time you may go through and be like, whoa, it's a fire hose. I'm learning and healing. I need to go back through it again. And you get to go through it twice. I believe it's indefinitely, or is it twice?
Indefinitely.
Yeah, once you've paid. So you can go through the first year and you can go again, and keep going to stay up to date. It's wonderful, and we're grateful. And I want to say at Call to Peace Ministries, our advocates are our boots on the ground. They are what makes our ministry go. We have over 100 affiliated advocates. That's not just here in America, y'all. We are international, and I love that. They are volunteers mostly, and I think they are all volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
and so unless they're on staff, and so they are who walk alongside our women, and we're grateful for them. And they're also church partnership liaisons. Another opportunity once you become an advocate is to enter into our church partnership avenue, where you can become a church partnership liaison, where you walk alongside churches and help them be able to come communities and safe places that respond well to oppression within their congregation that's happening, and call the oppressor into repentance. But I want to say this stuff, as you know, these things, these services that we offer they're for free for the women, but they do cost us. And that is the reason why we're able to offer them for free, is because we have amazing donors who have partnered with us to be able to offer these services to women. We do have advocate coordinators that manage the advocates and that help keep everything going and organized. And so we have an intake team and everything else. And so we want to invite you to be part of this work. We want to invite you to be the hands and feet of Jesus with us. Right now in our campaign, we have a goal of raising $175,000. So far, we are $1 short of $5,000, y'all. So I'd love to invite you to donate and just kind of give you some of these ideas. With $50, you will provide a woman 2 hour intake calls when she calls. So every woman gets one intake call. So $50 will give 2 women one intake call. Sorry, I think I said that wrong there. With $400, you can provide a Protect the Flock training for church. We do not charge churches for Protect the Flock training. We do ask for travel reimbursement, but Protect the Flock training for churches are free. And then $1,500 will give 6 women with highly complex cases advocacy for a month. That is with our advocacy coordinators or somebody that is well trained, because some cases are extremely and highly complex. And so we want to invite you to be part of that. And I would love for Camilla to be able to share, since she's on the board, why are donors important? Why would you invite somebody to be part of this ministry?
Just off the cuff, we can't do it without them. Every service that we offer is free to the survivors. Many times when they're coming out of domestic abuse, they don't even know where they're going to live. The last thing we want them to worry about is how to get help. And we can provide that, and we can only provide that when we have people that step up behind us and support us financially. And that is really the backbone of this ministry. It is all important, and we are so appreciative of those that continue to step up and support Call to Peace Ministries. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for everybody who's joined us here today. Thank you, Camilla. Thank you, Dr. Deborah. This has been a wonderful conversation. So hope today you've walked away inspired, maybe to become an advocate. Check out our advocacy courses. If you need a scholarship, you can reach out on our page to Dr. Deborah. We never want to turn anybody away because of cost issues. And then also pray about it. Pray about giving. Pray about how the Lord would have you be involved and be part of being the hands and feet of Jesus to women impacted by abuse. Every bit, as I mentioned, counts and makes a difference. So thank you so much to everybody who's already given and donated. We're excited to see the Lord's provision, and we look forward to seeing what he's going to do this month. Hope all y'all